What's up, everyone? Spencer here with Pool Genius, and I'm joined by our lead analyst, Jason List. And we're here at Circa Ultimate Contest Weekend. We're here to talk about the contest that everyone is talking about here, Circa Survivor. And we're going to start planning for the holiday weeks because there's a little wrinkle with Circa Survivor, isn't there, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things it's known for, other than all the money, is that it has special rules around the holidays. They create special holiday weeks, making it a 20-week contest where they separate out the Thanksgiving and Black Friday games into their own pick week, and they also separate out the games right around Christmas, early in week 17, into their own. There's 3 games there as well.
So yeah, you have 4 games to pick from in the Thanksgiving Black Friday slate. Then you have 3 games to pick from on the Christmas Day slate. So that's a really condensed slate of games. Like normally you're picking between 15 early in the season. And then when the bye weeks come in, a little less than that. But the reason we're talking about this now before the season starts is because you don't have to settle on a team right now before the season, but you need to sort of plan for it. Isn't that right? You need to have it in the back of your mind of who are the options to use so you can sort of have a plan and not use up those options right away in the first weeks.
Yeah, I think the key is to have a plan and be adaptable. But in order to be adaptable, you have to plan to be adaptable. So you can't use 3 of the teams on Thanksgiving in the first 4 weeks and then hope to be able to adapt. You can use some, but you have to do it with purpose and understanding who else you're saving as an option.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get to it. Let's look at these Thanksgiving and Black Friday games. Remember, there is 1 game on Black Friday. So those 4 games is its own slate in Circa Survivor. We have Green Bay at Detroit is the first game. Detroit is favored by 2.5. Kansas City at Dallas. KC is, remember, these lines are before the season. KC is favored by 5.5. The Bengals at the Ravens. The Ravens favored by 5.5. And then the Bears at the Eagles. Philadelphia favored by 7 before the season starts. How do you feel about that Thanksgiving and Black Friday slate?
Yeah, I think we've correctly identified the favorites there. I mean, things could shift a little bit. Obviously, any of those, I think, top 3, the Chiefs, the Eagles, or the Ravens, could become the biggest favorite by the time Thanksgiving rolls around. With just subtleties in how those teams play and how their opponents are playing. But the Eagles do project as probably the team most likely to be the biggest of the favorite of the 3. And then that other matchup, Detroit, Green Bay, correct? Detroit and Green Bay are both expected to be playoff contenders in the NFC North. So that line's probably going to be a little lower. Even Green Bay went in there and beat them recently, and so on Thanksgiving. And so I think that one's the one, unless there's an injury, probably doesn't project to be a big spread.
Yeah, and one thing I want to point out before we get too far into this is both the Lions and the Chiefs are playing on both of these slates.
Yes.
So they are on the Thanksgiving slate, and then they're on the 3-game Christmas slate. So that makes your options even more condensed. Like there's fewer to pick from here. So you really have to be selective of which teams you're saving. Now, you said Philadelphia is probably going to be the chalk here. Probably going to be the most popular pick, unless there's injuries, stuff we can't see before the season. Let me ask you, is that going to influence people taking the Eagles or a lack of people taking the Eagles, say week 1, Circa Survivor? They're a 7-point favorite in that first game against the Cowboys. Are we going to see a little bit of a reduced ownership on them in Circa Survivor compared to, say, contests that don't have this exclusive Thanksgiving pick week?
I would almost certainly guess that. I think there are several things going on. The contest does allow you, if you pick the Eagles, if they were to lose, you could rebuy. Although I don't think that's a great option to use. I wouldn't want to use the Eagles and then not have them available. And so that's kind of my disincentive as I think through the contest. I think a lot of people think that way. You'll still get some that use them because at some point, right, they become if they're unpopular enough as a 7-point favorite when people are picking 5 and 6-point favorites, they do have high EV, but in a contest like this, you're not playing for just week 1. You're playing for week 18, 20 picks in. And to me, Philadelphia has so much usefulness throughout the season, including Thanksgiving, that you probably don't want to kind of commit yourself to being done with them.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask you, looking at this Thanksgiving
Mhm.
and Black Friday slate,
Yeah.
mindful, we are before the season starts. How are you approaching this? Since you're the lead analyst, you're
Yeah.
the pool guy here at
Yeah.
Pool Genius.
Yeah.
You had some great pool wins, NFL Survivor wins last year. How are you mapping this out? Because
Okay.
we talked a little bit before this, and our tools do this too over on Pool Genius. Sometimes you want to get away from those chalky picks.
Yeah.
So, like, we identified the Eagles as the chalky pick,
Yep.
probably.
Yep.
Are you going to plan around that? Are you looking to save the Chiefs per se? How are you just looking at this from your own perspective?
Yeah, we'll talk about these teams and the rest of their schedule, because the thing about these teams, you mentioned Kansas City, you mentioned Detroit playing on Christmas, so we have 2 of the 3 Christmas teams that also play on Thanksgiving, and not only do they play, they're probably the favorite. So you have 2 teams eating up of the 7 games. There's only actually 5 favorites to pick from,
Yep.
right? As we projected today. Obviously, injuries can change that throughout the season. Um, so to me, how you want to think about it as we think about Kansas City, as we think about these teams, is how do I build optionality in the way I attack this contest? Okay. Kansas City, first of all, Philadelphia is, I think, if I were mapping out, how would I play it? If I were just not caring about what anybody else was doing, I would say I
Which
need
is
to
not a
use
good strategy, by the way.
right. But if we
I
start,
know.
if we start there and we say, how are other people? How would I play it, or how would a reasonably intelligent person?
Yeah.
Just first thing to play this contest.
Yeah.
I think it's Philadelphia, probably the bigger of the favorites. Baltimore more useful in lots of weeks.
Mhm.
Kansas City also on Christmas, and in Detroit too risky relative to the other options. That's how most people I think are going to think,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and so they're going to think Philadelphia. Does that mean you should avoid Philadelphia? I think the answer is it depends on what the numbers are like on the ground when we show up to Thanksgiving, right? If they're a 7-point favorite and these other teams are 5.5, 6, those other teams are going to be great leverage against a really popular Philadelphia. If they're 8.5, 9, and those other teams are 4.5, you might want to roll with the Eagles, right? And so you may want to have them available. So I don't want to commit to. I would definitely play it this way. I think you want to have Philadelphia as an option, and certainly not use them week 1. But I think you want to be able to pivot depending on how you see the numbers shaping up.
Yeah, and I think we can actually, like, we got into some of the numbers right there and breaking down who's going to be popular and whatnot. I think we can actually zoom out a little bit
Yeah.
and look at this from just a game theory perspective. There's a couple schools of thought when it comes to a short slate, right? One of them is, I don't care if I'm with the favorite. I just want to get through this slate.
Yes. Yes.
Because it's a short slate, the options could be dried up.
Yep.
So maybe there's merit to just doing the Eagles, and then you're going to get frisky with your other picks way before that or way after that. Like, you don't want to get too cute with Thanksgiving. But then again, like you said, and like our tools identify, if you can get leverage there, by all means, take that leverage, because that's what we're all about, is finding leverage at every turn, every single week in the schedule, and taking advantage of it. I mean, that's how you won your Survivor pool last year. We documented that on the YouTube channel. So I think you would agree with that strategy. So having said all of that, I think the Chiefs are going to be a little bit sneaky on Thanksgiving because they're on the road.
Yep.
And Philadelphia's at home. They're probably going to be bigger favorites. People don't like taking road teams in Survivor. I think you can use that to your advantage a little bit. Obviously, look at our public pick data. Look at Jason's write-up when the time comes to, like, double check all of that and see if they are actually a good leverage sneaky pick. But that's just my thought here on August 21st when we're mapping this out.
Yeah, I think Kansas City is the thing about that is if you use Kansas City as a leverage pick or the sneaky pick on Thanksgiving, you can't do it on Christmas when there's only 3 games to pick on, right? And so you mentioned, do we eat the chalk here? This is a contest where some weeks you probably need to eat the chalk because you just need that pick to advance.
Yep.
and you have to hope you get through on that week when it's a popular pick, but it's also the smart strategic pick. And then other weeks where you take your shots. And so you can't take shots every week. You can't, like, because the teams you take shots with are either Kansas City, Baltimore, Buffalo when they're under 10% owned,
Yep.
or a team like, I don't know, a Cincinnati who may be a 4.5-point favorite, but the 10-point favorite is super popular, and so you just have EV leverage. But you can't do that every week. So you got to pick your battles. Kansas City is an option there. And we'll talk about Christmas too, but can you fade both Philadelphia and Washington? It becomes difficult, right? You can't use the Chiefs for both. If you're going to do that, you have to use Baltimore then KC or something like that.
Yeah, so with that in mind, because this Christmas slate is really going to play into that decision making, let's look at the Christmas slate here. We have the Cowboys at Washington. Washington now before the season, favored by 5.5 at home. The Lions, again, play on Thanksgiving and Christmas at Minnesota. Detroit favored by 2.5. And the Denver Broncos at the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City favored by 4.5. Those are the three games we have to choose from.
Yep.
So it's like, if I want to go contrarian, what I think to be contrarian that week, and the Chiefs, I can't really take one of the biggest favorites. I guess I'm locked into the Commanders then. I mean, I wouldn't say locked in, but they're the biggest favorite. I think personally, Detroit, Minnesota is a toss-up, especially Detroit. You could argue the better team on the road there.
Yeah.
Even though Detroit has had success in Minneapolis, but that's neither here nor there. So do I really want to pigeonhole myself on that short slate and say, I guess I'm rolling with the Commanders?
Well, I think I think it's likely the Commanders are the popular pick, right?
That too.
So I think there's it could be super popular. As we record this before the season, obviously the season can play out any number of ways. You don't know which teams get used in a week where everybody else gets eliminated, so that team's then not available anymore. But as we look at Washington's schedule right now, there's not really any super obvious plays. I mean, they can be picked in week one, and people doing so are basically committing to not using them on Christmas. And then after that, there's not really like a super obvious spot. I think the next most obvious for Washington might be week 3 against the Raiders. They'll be favored maybe by as much as 6 points, 7, 5, somewhere in that range. When week 3 rolls around, but they're not the top favorite that week. They are an option.
Yeah.
And so I really think that Washington is unlikely to be super popular and thus likely to be available. But Christmas presents its own challenges in this way. We all dream of Christmas, right? The reality is 99% of entries aren't going to make it there, but you have to plan as if you do. But when Christmas rolls around, there were under 20 entries in it last year.
Yeah.
There have typically, that's 4 weeks after Thanksgiving slate chops people.
Yeah.
You're down to the nitty gritty. You got 2 picks to go. You can taste it. You're probably not going super contrarian. And there may be only 10 entries left, right? Then you're at the vagaries of who's available to who. And so you can't really plan, but I think it's most likely you want to probably lean towards saving Washington just in case, but be willing to pivot to one of these others. Because if I told you that Washington's 50% owned, and let's say Detroit or Minnesota, something happens with injuries, the way they're playing, and one of them's now a 4-point favorite, 3.5, that may be the way to go if it's 10% owned versus 50%, right? So you want to have those options, I think.
Yeah, and it's hard for me to sit here in August and say the Vikings are going to be an option. Myself as a Vikings fan, it saddens me to say that. But like, I'm going to be looking to use Minnesota way earlier in the season. I really don't consider them on this board.
Yeah.
For me, it comes down to, like you said, the Commanders and Kansas City. And if I'm eyeing Kansas City for the Christmas slate, that kind of makes my decision there. But then again, like we said,
I mean, it would take stones, by the way. I'll just throw this out there. It would take stones. Yep. It would take stones to pick Dallas. If you're down to 10 entries. That said, if you thought 50 or 60% of the pool was on Washington, a heads up play. If that line say under 4, if it's like a 4, my gosh, it would take some stones but the other reason it takes stones is you want to be the only one doing that maneuver. And so if other people join you, it's a bad move.
Yeah,
it's one of those plays. So, but that's in play. And depending on how many, depending on how many entries make it to Christmas, depending on the line, because you don't want to be taking a 25% to win team, but a 40% when half the field's on the other side, that can happen, and that's the beauty of these weeks.
Yeah, and I think out of all these teams we see here, especially on that Christmas slate with 3 games, I think Dallas is the biggest question mark. They could have the widest range of outcomes of if are they a halfway decent team? Are they a good team? They could really be. We just don't know going into the season. So
new coach.
Then again with Washington too, we've talked about Washington in our NFL preseason article and stuff, how they might be due for a little bit of regression. So if those two things line up, where Washington's a little worse than market expectation, Dallas is a little better, all of a sudden that becomes a really interesting game. And the Commanders aren't just slam it, move on to the next week, move on to Sunday to make your picks. It becomes a decision at that point.
So I think we need to maybe talk about like some of these options late in the year with these teams, because I actually do think this is 2025 is a challenge in that KC's favorite twice on these dates. Detroit is, Baltimore's on them, Philly's on them. But I think the schedule shapes up where if you plan, you can kind of like defer your decision until late in the season. I'm going to walk you through some of these teams, and where I think that, like, let's say Kansas City. If you can avoid using Kansas City in week 3 against the Giants or week 7 against the Raiders, right? Chiefs play a tough schedule otherwise early. If you get to week 12, then you have Indianapolis at home the week before the Thanksgiving picks. You have the Thanksgiving slate. You have the Chargers, probably less of an option on week 15, but you never know. You have week 16 against the Titans, and then you have the Christmas game. So that's like 5, I think, spots where if you just get to week 12, you don't have to say I'm using the Chiefs definitely on Thanksgiving at the start of the year. Just say I'm going to get to week 12 with the Chiefs, and I think there are 5 options, and I can decide how I'm going to play it out. Same with Baltimore, who's on Thanksgiving. You can save them. I mean, they're going to be really tempting early. They play the Browns in week 2. The Browns at home. If the Browns look bad in week 1, that line could be who knows what. And but if you can make it to week 11 and 12, they play the Browns again, the Jets, the Thanksgiving game, Pittsburgh in week 14 at home, New England in week 16 at home, games where they'll be favored and probably close to one of the top favorites, depending on what's going on. So if you can save Baltimore until Thanksgiving, you'll have options to use them after Thanksgiving. If you don't have to be like, oh, I have to use them on Thanksgiving now because I saved them. You can use them. Same with Detroit. They have options, 12, 14, 16. Philadelphia less so, but they have Vegas in week 15. So if you see everybody's using them on Thanksgiving and you want to save them, you can still use them at home against the Raiders in week 15, and that's a viable spot. So what I'm saying is maybe your best strategy is to plan on, I'm taking some risks early to save these teams to week 12, and if I get there, I have all of them and I can choose how to play it out.
And I think you hit the nail on the head right there. That's why we're talking about this right now. August 24th, 21st, before the season, we're thinking about how we're going to map this out, because the conclusion that you just came to, you're going to have to go with different teams early. You're going to have to shy away from your week 1 Philadelphia favored by 7 over the Cowboys, because you want that optionality later. And as you were going through all those teams, I pulled up our Pool Genius season planner tool, which is great. You can go to poolgenius.com, click on the free trial for our NFL Survivor product, and you can look at all the win probabilities. It's just a huge grid. It highlights the highest win probabilities each week in bright green. So you can see that at one glance of where you want to use these teams. And you were talking about week 12 there. So I went down the column for week 12, and it looks like almost all these teams, all the favorites on Thanksgiving and Christmas, are also like pretty
the best
good
options
favorites
on week 12.
So we could almost lump week 12 into this whole Thanksgiving Christmas conversation, because that's going to decide how you play those weeks. And like you said, Kansas City against Indianapolis at home, Cincinnati, well, they'll be an underdog coming into that, but they are against New England, favored week 12. Philadelphia at Dallas, favored. Baltimore's one of the biggest favorites of the week,
Yep.
projected against the Jets at home.
Yep.
Detroit, one of the biggest favorites of the week, projected at home against the Giants. So it's like
Yes.
week 12 is the first domino of a decision point.
And the good thing
before
there is you'll know if you make it to that point, kind of how it's shaping up and how many entries are left. Because you might want to play Thanksgiving differently if there's a lot of people to get there versus if it's like last year where it was only 53. And those may change how you want to take your shots. So, yeah, if you can defer your decisions while still having the options, if you aren't pot committed to using a team in exactly 1 week, that's the best way, I think, to plan out this season.
Yeah, and especially like it's super helpful to look at it from that lens and map these out and give yourself options across the board if you're playing multiple entries too. Because like the goal is to get as many entries to that level as you can, and then you can maybe diversify or go all in. Play it how you will with extra flexibility. But yeah, that's a great way to look at it. Is there anything else you want to consider from a strategy standpoint when it comes to those slates, or anything leading up to that would influence that optionality that you have?
I just think keep an eye on the pool size. I think knowing where this thing is trending can impact how you want to save teams. The more entries that are left, the lower your chances of winning relatively are still, no matter how late in the year. By week 4 last year, 95% of the pool was down. Your value of your entry at 4 weeks in was 20x what you paid if you survived it. Some weeks that might not happen until week 10, right? And so knowing like where I am in the pecking order and how risky I should be depends on what pool size we're looking at as we approach these holiday weeks.
Yeah, and those are all the key factors to keep your eye on as we go through this. So go ahead, look every single week for Jason's article coming out. He's going to have an overall NFL Survivor strategy article to go along with our tools to help guide you along the way of that optionality you should be looking for. And he's also going to be doing a Circa Survivor exclusive article every single week, breaking down what to look for in the Circa Survivor contest and how that optionality is a little bit different because of those holiday weeks. So anything else you want to add before we wrap this up?
No, I think we're good. Just good luck if you're playing Circa or any other contest. Good to think through these scenarios. Good to think about how you can improve your chances just a little bit in a really tough contest.
Yeah, and let's hope you make it to these holiday slates so you'll have plenty of equity in those entries.